Well, good afternoon and happy Friday. I'm Liz Severins, and I am delighted to be joined by my partners, Jim Ware, Keith Robinson, and Brian Kozlowski, as we share some big ideas from our annual Leadership Forum. Forum's my favorite event of the year that we do at Focus because we bring together leaders from around the world, chat about industry topics, and share best practices. So lucky you on this Friday, because now we're sharing these insights with all of you. So this year at our forum, our 16th forum, it was focused on leading with intention, because as Ron Burgundy says, you are a big deal. As leaders and influencers in your organizations, your words and your actions matter. You're always on stage, being watched by those around you all the time, whether you like it or not. So it is important to being intentional so that you get the outcome that you want for your firms, for your teams, and for yourself. So this year, we were joined by 27 firms from around the world who know how important leading with intentionality is. Over 60 leaders from these firms joined us to talk about how they lead with intention when it comes to culture, succession, strategic planning, and rewards and compensation. So let's dive in and share their thoughts and big ideas. So Jim, take it away. Can you share what leaders are thinking about when they are talking about leading with intention when it comes to culture?
Sure. Greetings, everyone. Happy Friday. This was, I think, our 16th annual. Is that right, Liz? 16 of these we've done, and they're all hugely fun and useful. And this year, the discussion of culture was highlighted by the intensity, the competition that's in the investment world these days, and more so than 20 years ago when we started talking about culture and how to do it right and how to get a strong culture. I think the importance of intention around culture now is even more important than ever. So clients ask us, what do we need to know about culture? Because we do these surveys, which are large, and thank you, Liz, for turning these things out. They can be hundreds of pages. And clients look at them and say, wow, a lot of information here. What are we supposed to take away? And on the sort of upper left here, you see, this is what over time we found is most important to a really strong culture. So as you think about being intentional about culture, and you think about coming out of COVID and all the competition in the industry and all, just keep this simple little diagram in mind, that there are 4 levels, which actually Abraham Maslow addressed in his work on psychology and the hierarchy of needs. At the bottom level, people need to feel safe and secure in their work. And so during COVID, they not only worried about their health, they also worried about their wealth. Namely, would I have a job? What's going to happen to my company? What's going to happen to the world as a result of COVID? So that is an area that became really important during the COVID experience and remains really important. By the way, the numbers you see here are on a scale of, this is a scale of 5 or 6, Liz?
That would be 6.
6 scale. Yeah, it surprised me because some of them, the good companies we work with, are clearly in the 5 range. So we do see that. But these are on the scale of 6, and you see the average that we find for the firms we work with. But safety security is absolutely necessary for all kinds of things like good candor and trust, etc. If you have that, then you start thinking about, okay, fine, but I want to be part of something that's not just me alone as an independent contributor, individual. I want to be in a team. I want to belong. I want to feel connected. That's the second level. If that starts to happen, well, and the first 2 are covered, and that's great. But now you look to the third level and you say, but am I advancing and growing and developing and that sort of thing? If you're not, you're going to feel a little frustrated. So those are the 3 big ones there: security, belonging, mastery. And finally, you could be doing all those three, but you work for a firm, and this is so important to younger people these days. Are we doing anything that's meaningful, that's contributing, that helps the world be a better place? If not, my motivation tends to fall down. It tends to collapse if we're not doing something really useful. So that's our simplified diagram of what you as leaders want to be intentional about, those four levels. And another way to think of it, this is particularly important coming out of this epidemic, that the whole COVID experience, is mastery, autonomy, and purpose. Those three things are really important. The mastery piece you see in lavender there. Autonomy came out of COVID in an interesting way. We all had to become remote. And we found in some of our survey work that firms got more efficient and more effective in that remote world. So autonomy, which was always important as a motivator, got a whole new look, that people said, you know what, I can really improve and up my game with autonomy. So that was hugely important. And then, of course, purpose at the top of the hierarchy there. So mastery, autonomy, and purpose were very important to intention. If you're doing those things well, then our measurements that we use in our surveys will tell you, do we have raving fans, happy campers? Are people sort of neutral or on the fence? Or are they actually unhappy here? And those people we counsel to go find a place where you're happy. You know, life's too short to be at a firm where you're not happy. And the bottom graph here that you see really illustrates the point that this hybrid work environment is becoming a reality. So there is a need to understand autonomy and to understand how that plays into your culture building. So again, really important time to be intentional about culture, and reach out to us if you have questions about this stuff, because we think about this day and night. It's the area that we want to be helpful in. So with that, I will pass it on, but hopefully that was somewhat useful to you as listeners.
Well, this is Keith. Welcome, everyone. Succession and tension. There's a phenomenon going on in the demographics of our world where many leaders, founders, are aging out. So they're kind of like me, old guys, little snow in the beard, and have not been prepared to create succession, either economic succession or leadership succession in their firm. So we hosted a panel of 3 leaders who've done it successfully. And what we've recognized was there are 5 things that people need to pay attention to in terms of being prepared for succession. And it's a long process. It's not something you can say, well, I think I'm going to hang up my cleats, in 6 months. This is, in some cases, a 10-year process. So let me hit the 5 points, and then I'll lay on some wisdom from some of our panelists. First, it takes time. As I mentioned, this is not a 6-month process. This is a process that will take time. And you can see the hourglass in the upper left there. Recognize that it takes time and begin the work now. And this is not just economic succession, but talent succession. And how deep is your organization, not just at the C-suite, but in other key positions that keep things moving forward. The second image there is readiness. Do we have people who are actually ready to take over when the time comes? And you do need to give yourself a runway, time again, but we also need to make sure that we can remove the water wings and they can confidently dive into the pool, into the position that they are succeeding. The third one is, have we delivered messages both internally to our firm and externally to all of our stakeholders, whether it's our owners or our clients, that succession is coming, we are prepared. Interesting phenomenon, by the way, this is coming up more and more in RFPs. Why? Because the founders and the senior leaders are aging out. And let's face it, institutional investors want to know if there's a plan. So are we messaging properly? Have we created the right messages, not to generate fear, but to generate optimism about where we're going? The little guy there you see with the boomerang is all about what we call the boomerang effect. And have we managed succession in a way where our leaders don't leave and then all of a sudden decide, well, I'm bored after 6 months, I want to come back. We see this a lot in founder-led firms. We call it founder syndrome, where, once they've done a few rounds of golf, or maybe they've taken some sort of a trip of a lifetime, they come back and they want to muddle around. And unfortunately, it creates all sorts of chaos. So we need to prepare our leaders who are actually leaving the organization for their next phase of their life, for their journey. And lastly, we never want to set succession up as a horse race. It's not a competition. And we talked a lot about GE and what happened with Jack Welch's succession, because what we see in that one was it was not a success. It was actually, in our view, a bit of a failure because they had 3 great leaders and only one stayed with GE and the other 2 left. So we don't want to create win-lose. We want to create win-wins when we're thinking about succession. We laid all of this out for our leaders, and we said, what are these things that really matter to you? And here were a few of their highlights. Certainly, several of them talked about the timeline, and that this isn't something that can be done at a moment's notice. And these were all benefactors, by the way. Many of them were current CEOs who succeeded other founders and said the time was important for me to get my head wrapped around it, for me to develop and to be ready when the time comes. So never underestimate the amount of time. Boomerang syndrome, right, or founder syndrome was something we spent a lot of time about. And several said, we did have that issue. And we really had to address it with direct, candid communication about the damage that was being done by the drop-in retired founder. And so they talked a little bit about that and what were some of the strategies that they used there. And finally, the last one that I think was really important that many of them talked about was we set our organizations up internally and externally for success by talking about this, not by making it some big secret. We talked about it inside the organization. And oh, by the way, we talked about it outside the organization. So these were things that really resonated for them. And these 5 points really came out of a dialogue we had with them in terms of what made it successful in their organizations, because all of them created great succession and an ongoing approach to succession as a part of their culture.
Hello, everyone. It's Brian. We had a great session on strategic planning. And what we covered the 3 Ps, the plan itself, the people involved, and purposeful decisions. So we'll start at the plan. Plan all starts with your stakeholders, your clients, your employees, your owners, and to an increasing amount, society. And how a successful plan has your clients smiling, your employees smiling, your owners smiling. And society has been a real interesting one, because when I started with this model, the GHOST model specifically 8 years ago, society was a lot of community service, and that's really evolved on the investing side to ESG and sustainable investing, on the employee side to all efforts around DE&I. It's really a broader focus on the purpose of an organization and how the society really embeds itself in different parts of the stakeholder goals. We talked about our framework, the GHOST framework, and why it is effective and why it has been effective for each of our panelists. It's a macro and micro combination. The goals and the objectives, a little bit more micro. Where are we going? What direction do we want to set? The strategies and tactics, more micro. What are the exact things we're going to do over the next 3 years? We spent a lot of time talking about the right time frame, and given the changes in the industry, how 3 years now feels like the right amount. Why this format is great, or why this framework is great, because it allows you to include a lot of different thinkers. In your organizations, you're going to have people who are more macro thinkers. They can participate in the process as much as those who are more micro thinkers. And that gets us to the people. We talked a lot about the importance of having the wisdom of the group, including more voices in the process, those that are influential in the direction of the firm, getting their ideas, having it feel like it's the firm strategies, not just leadership strategies. And that is super, super important when developing a plan. We utilize the RISI model, which is another framework we do around accountability, because what we need to do at the end of the day is who's going to do what by when. And if I think Keith's going to do something and he thinks I'm going to do it, and Liz thinks Jim's going to do it, at the end of the day, it just doesn't get done. So having that accountability and making sure the right people are in the right room to have the right conversation helps to move the process forward. And lastly, we talked about decision rights, which is very important. It is a very important part of the process. And no matter where you fall on the spectrum, being very clear upfront about who owns the decision rights on the plan and how you're going to make decisions at each different decision node is very important, because without that, the plan tends to fall apart. So what were some of the key takeaways? This whole process, well, there were two. One, a lot of firms realize they actually don't have a strategic plan. They have some ideas on a piece of paper, maybe it's a product strategy, but when they think about it from a firm perspective, they didn't really have anything. And what our panelists brought to life was this whole exercise is a lot of work, but it's important work, because what we're hearing increasingly, especially in our culture surveys, is this is the direction people are looking for. People want to know where the firm is going and how I tie into what my day-to-day activity is to where the firm wants to go. So it's an important part of retention tool. We're going to talk about rewards in a second. On people, it's an intrinsic reward. Having people know the direction that they're going and having the transparency to understand how what they do every day in their role ties back to where the firm is going. So it really was a great conversation and built upon the culture and succession conversations we had had prior to that. And lastly, Keith and I led what I thought was a great session on rewards. And it's obviously very topical this time of year. Keith, I think, I was reflecting on this. I think at my 8 years with the firm that we have successfully gotten the word rewards into the vernacular of many people in the industry. And why I think it's important is because it's really driving this balance of extrinsic and intrinsic benefits to an organization, how they drive and help to attract and retain talent. And we spoke about culture, and it all starts with your culture and your strategy, how your rewards approach aligns with both of those. We talked about and answered the question we often get, what's the best rewards approach we've seen? The reality is there is no best approach. It's the one that aligns with the firm's culture and strategy. And it really starts with your philosophy. Do you have a philosophy? Most firms have an investment philosophy, I believe. Well, why not have a rewards philosophy? If your greatest asset are your people, you need to be able to talk about how you reward them. What are the rules of the road and what's important? So we got around and talked about all of those things. Keith, when we got to the conversation of value and market environment, we had some interesting conversations, didn't we?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, driven by value to the organization. What you're paying for is value. You're not paying for a butt in the chair. You're paying for somebody to deliver value to the client, to deliver value to their colleagues, and so on. So you want to be able to articulate what we call the value equation. The market is simply a sanity check, because it's a relative game. Rewards is a relative game, and relative both intrinsically, what do we offer people that want them to stay? And those are some of the cultural factors Jim spoke about, but also what do we offer extrinsically that keeps them here, that aren't handcuffs, but are actually relative to the market a good thing? Because I don't care how much money you make, if you're miserable, you won't stay in the job very long. So the market is simply a sanity check, nothing more.
And lastly, we concluded with our core principles of fair, transparent, and simple, and the importance of being able, when thinking about your rewards plan, consistently evaluating it against those core principles. Is our approach fair? Do folks think it fairly rewards them for the value they provide the organization? The transparency, how well do we connect the dots between how the firm does and how individuals do, and how what they do every day ties back to the mission, ties back to the culture, ties back to the strategy? And how easily can we describe what our rewards approach is? If we can't do it in less than a minute, we probably have created something that's a little bit complex. I think the key learning from our conversations was around the rewards philosophy and how many firms just don't have one. And it's a missing recruiting tool. It's something that lays out what makes your firm different. How do we think about our culture? What's unique about our strategy? And how do we think about rewards? It's a just a great tool to get folks, to attract folks to your organization, and certainly to keep folks and have them be very clear on the rewards approach. So it was a great session and really enjoyed the conversation. And again, thank our panelists. Liz?
Thank you to Jim, Keith, Brian, and all of our attendees from this year's Leadership Forum. It was just a great couple of weeks that we got to spend together to talk about these best practices. And I really appreciated all their candor and willingness to share best practices with their colleagues and now with you. So as always, to hear a recording of this, visit our website. It's under our thoughts or our YouTube channel. We have lots of information there for you. Our next Hit It and Quit It webinar actually turns to you. What's bugging you? We want to hear from you. Submit some questions to us and we're going to answer them about what's happening in the industry and what you're dealing with as you look to 2024. And because of the Thanksgiving holiday in the United States, we are going to be doing our next webinar on Monday, November 27th. Same time though, 12 o'clock Central. And again, as always, if you're interested in joining our distribution list, just reach out to Laura and she will surely make sure you get on that list. So thank you again for joining us today. We look forward to being with you after the holiday and seeing you soon. Bye-bye. Have a good weekend.